Welcome to another Tech Hour session. My name is Lena, and in today's session, we are going to talk about licenses and license distribution. There have been some major changes over the last several releases regarding licenses. We have added a couple of different license types in release 8.1.1. We have improved license distribution in releases 8.1.3 and 8.1.4. So this is what we are going to talk about in today's video. So let's start first with how permissions basically are distributed in Creatio, and then we are going to talk about how licenses what licenses allow you to do, what license types there are, and we will look specifically in details at those licenses. So, permissions in Creatio. First of all, when you are defining the permissions of what the user can or cannot do, you will be talking about the user type. So some of the licenses that we will look at later today will be applicable to two different user types. So they can be both used for company employee and for the external user. However, there are some license types that are specific per user type and cannot be applied to the wrong user type. So your restrictions of permissions of what the person can do starts on the user type. Basically, we are already starting to see the differences in terms of what will be possible within a particular user type, which type of licenses you will be able to operate with. So when you create a user, they're linked to a specific user type. And based on that user type, you will have your choice of licenses. Next, after the user type has been defined, you will be looking at the personal license type. So again, before we even get to object permissions and operation permissions for individual users, what will be allowed for that user within the system will be defined on the license level. If something is not allowed for a user on the license level, we will not be able to grant them this within any of the operations or object permissions in Creatio later on. So keep this in mind. This will be important later when we talk about license specifics. Then once users are created, once they have received their licenses, you're starting to talk about what business data they will be exposed to. So again, there will be some limitations within the license type that you could see in terms of which business data could be exposed to the user. However, with new license types, there are less differences between that within different licenses. So after that, after basically access to the business data, you can decide which business data you're exposing to the user and set up the appropriate permissions. And the last thing that you will be dealing with is access to functionality. Access to functionality, it's basically which operations you're granting the user, because again, even if you're a full user, if you have the full user license, you could be limiting what the person can do. You will have a wide range of users from system admin to regular salespeople, and they will have obviously very different operation permissions within the system. Okay, now let's talk about the differences. We have two user types. You have your company employee user. The only restriction on the license, basically on this user type level, would be that you cannot issue this user an external license. So if you have a person that's supposed to look at the portal or how the portal looks like, you will have to create a separate user for them. Now, external users. External users have a lot more restrictions than the company employee user. So one of the main things that they cannot be connected to the all employees organizational roles. There is a separate role structure for that. User email addresses cannot match the company's domain. So this is meant, if we're talking about external user, this is meant to be for those that are company suppliers, partners, clients, if they're logging into the portal. There are some limitations in terms of which functionality they can be exposed. That, for example, chats, email synchronization, and phone integrations will not be available to external users. This is the limitation up on the license level. Obviously, the app creation and app customization is not available to them, so that's probably is very much expected, but we're just mentioning that, so these users are not expected to make changes to your environment. And they cannot be imported from the LDAP, so you have to create them separately, or you have to create them basically manually in Creatio. Now, Creatio licensing. If we're talking a full user license, and this is where a lot of confusion comes from, I think, and some of the additional user types, let's talk about how you need to distribute those licenses and how those work. Because if we're talking about the full user type versus additional licenses, there are some differences in that. So the regular users need a platform license to be able to log in. So like if we're talking about a regular company employee user that will have access to sales, service, or marketing functionality, what you need to make sure that, first of all, in order to be able to log in, they need a platform license. And if you look at Creatio website, there are different plans for that platform license. Basically, it allows you different levels of support, different levels of what is included in that plan. But essentially, from the licensing standpoint, it's one license. It's a studio license. So everywhere from growth to unlimited, that's if we're talking about licensing, that's a studio license. Now, the product license is a little bit different. The product license is access to a particular product functionality. And the access to the product functionality is basically allowing your users to work with sales, Creatio functionality, orders, leads, opportunities, or, for example, to work with cases, services, and so on. So users that will have to be exposed to particular functionalities that will be part of their daily routine of what they're working with need to additionally have that license. So for full user, you are actually dealing with two licenses if we're talking about functionality, right? You have the platform license and then you have the functionality license. Certain sections, I will mention that certain sections will be available regardless whether a user has a license type or not. This is done so it's easier to expose that functionality to external users as well. So you might see that your user without the service license can still create cases. That was done on purpose. But generally speaking, if something is considered part of Creatio functionality, pre-configured functionality, then you have to grant a separate license on top of the studio license. And we will see this a little bit later in the examples. However, if we talk about additional users don't need the product licenses. Additional users basically don't need your platform. So additional user license, it's kind of like a standalone. Once you have your full users, your additional users basically you just pay for that additional license. So additional license is only one price. It's not consist of two. As long as you have full CRM user or full platform users, full users, then you can have additional users that will be exposed via portal, or maybe they have a limited user type. There's another user type that can be a company employee, by the way, but they don't require an additional basically licenses. So that license is self-sufficient as a standalone license if you grant it to the user. And again, we will see this in a demonstration. Okay, so what are the additional user licenses? And let's look at the options that we have. We have external B2B, we have external B2C, limited internal, self-service portal, and mobile only. So these are 5 additional user licenses that have been added since 8.1.1 release. All user types are available for all platform plans. So whichever plan you have picked, these licenses will be compatible with that plan. So if you have your full users on the growth, enterprise, or unlimited plan, all of these licenses can be used additional with that plan. Again, this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier, but for the additional user types, we provide access to the composable applications, free if the licenses to these applications are purchased for full user types. So again, if you're thinking about introducing limited user, a limited internal self-service portal and so on, you don't have to worry about purchasing the platform plan for them first. That is not necessary. But you do have to have a full, basically full users that have the plan plus the functionality. And all licenses work with the mobile application. Now, there is the mobile-only application, and it's actually the other way around. It restricts desktop access. But regardless of which license you're choosing, if your user needs to use the mobile application, we're not talking about the browser. That's a little bit different, but there is an application. They can install the application, log in with their regular credentials, and they're able to use Creatio application free of charge. There's no additional licensing for the mobile application. Okay, let's talk about the individual user these additional licenses. Let's see how they work. The external B2B portal user, it's closely resembles what we had previously as the portal user. But it has been expanded. If you remember in previous releases for many years, our portal licenses we were limiting the number of sections that they were exposed to depending on the license type that was purchased. That's no longer the case. So basically, this is the next step, the next evolution in that license. The external B2B license allows access to any Creatio section, and you don't have a limit in how many Creatio sections you can expose to the external B2B user. They will be able to see records created by system users, and they will be able to see records created by other external users. So this allows for a fair level of collaboration. Obviously, there are limitations that apply to them are fairly expected of what is not basically of the external user type. So they cannot be imported from LDAP. They cannot be part of all employees role. Basically, chat, email, and phone synchronization is not available. So these are just basically the general restrictions that apply to the external user type. They apply to the external B2B users. Let's take a closer look at how this can be configured. So let's create that user.
First, the external user that obviously we're going to talk about, that's the external B2B. So let me show you some of the settings that I have in the system, and I'm going to show you how it works for Alexander Wilson. So Alexander Wilson is my external B2B user. As you can see, here is the license that right now it's called external Creatio Cloud. So in certain environments, you might see a slightly older name of that license. However, the license, the external B2C, is separately available, and I will be showing how that works in the next example. So what's the difference with this particular license now? Well, you can expose any section to the given user. So let me log in under Alexander. So I have made an external workplace, so the portal workplace. In that workplace, I have added two sections for an example, cases and requests. So kind of like an example of what can be viewed from the existing standpoint, right? So like one of the existing sections, you can expose other sections as well. So Here it is. And the request sections, I can expose that as well. Based on the license, the records that the user can see are either created by the user themselves, so they can create it by clicking on the button New, or the records can be shared, for example, where Alexander is an applicant, right? So if this is like if somebody internally creates that record from the company employee, then that record will be shared with Alexander as well. So that is not limited. As you can see, I can't really configure the columns. So the columns that your user will see, you have to make sure that they're pre-configured on the page because again, this is the limitation of the license. As you can see, I don't have my communication panel. I have only like the feed messages. So that's what I can use in order to communicate with internal users. The feed messages can be exposed to external users for communication. So the communication panel is greatly reduced. And so this way, my external B2B user is able to see their own records. They're able to see other external user records if that is required. So for example, the example that I'm showing here, Jordan Anderson, who will be the B2C user, and we will see that in next example. Right now, as you can see, Alexander can see Jordan's records, and that record was created by a different external user. So I'm able to see his records. And that's where the main difference lies between the B2B and B2C, whether you can share access to other external records. And there's some, obviously, portal management in terms of organizations and so on in that functionality that is a little bit limited. But now the main difference is there's no limitation in terms of how many records you can see from the from how many sections. So there's no limitations on sections. And you can share internal records with this with the B2B one. You can other external users, other external B2B users can see each other's records if that is configured on the permission level. So you can configure that. As you can see, I can see Jordan's record. And that's the main thing about the external B2B.
Okay, the next user that we are going to talk about is the external B2C. So the main difference between the external B2B and external B2C is basically the exposure to other portal user records. So this is where the restrictions apply. If we're talking about the external B2C, that user cannot see other external records of other external users. So that's where one of the main restrictions apply. There's also some restrictions in terms of how the portal functionality can be managed for them, that it cannot be part of the organizations, no portal administrative functions for them. So there are a little bit more restrictions compared to B2B license. But the number of sections that can be exposed to them still unlimited. So there's no limitation on the license level. It's up to you to decide what should be exposed to these users. They cannot set up analytics, no columns set up, no filters set up, so they cannot do that. And same things apply to the CTI, email, and chat. They cannot use it. Again, this is fairly common for the external user type. They're just for the external users. They're not able to do that. Okay, so now let's go into Creatio and see how that's different. We're going to log in under the B2C user, and we're going to look at how that's different from B2B.
Okay, the second user that we are going to look at is the external B2C. So the Jordan Anderson has precisely that license. Let me quickly show you that. And so while both Jordan and Alexander have access to the same workplace, technically my permissions on the object level are actually exactly the same for both Jordan and Alexander. So my permissions is all external users can see all external user records for the request section, and the same I believe is in the cases as well. You will notice that while Jordan is creating records, so let me quickly switch to Jordan. Once we're logging in as Jordan, we will not be able to see any of Alexander's records, and the settings are exactly the same. So the settings basically on the object permission level is all external users can see all external user records. So in cases, Jordan can see only one case. Alexander was able to see two because one of them was from Jordan. In requests, Jordan can only see the requests from Jordan. These two records, I exposed them on purpose where the applicant is Alexander Wilson. The reason Jordan can see two of Alexander records, which we saw that there were more, the reason is of who the creator is. The record 11 and the record 21 were not created directly by Alexander. They were created by company employee. And so this is where the difference might lie in how you can expose certain records. If Alexander creates a new record right now, it will not be visible to Jordan. However, any record created by the company employee and that is shared with Jordan, let's say based on business processes or any other object permissions, could be exposed to a B2C user. So keep this in mind. The creator of the record matters whether it's another external user or a company employee user.
Okay, limited internal user. So this is a brand new license type. So we previously did not have a license type of that sort. So we had external portal. Basically, that was fairly similar to what previously existed. But the limited internal is a user type that can apply to even company employees. So this user type is a little bit different from the regular full user in a way that you're only exposing one section and one section only. It is limited on the license level. It additionally is connected to a limited workplace. So in order to set up the limited internal user, you need to do two things. You need to create the users, obviously, with that license, and you will need to create a special workplace for them. Now, the great part about that is if you're planning to have basically different limited internal users, you can set up separate workplaces to them. So for example, you can set up that one group will see section requests, and another one will see section opportunity. So yeah, we're not, even if you pick one section, it doesn't mean that all limited internal users have to use it. You actually can set up separate groups that will have that exposure to one section. And the section can be different as long as you set up separate workplaces for that purpose, and then ensure that this user is not added into multiple workplaces. If that's the case, you will be able to technically expose the internal limited internal users to more than one section, but not at a time. One user, one section within a limited workplace. So let's see how that works.
With the limited license, we have a system user, so like a company employee. And for me, the company employee, I believe it's Peter. Let me double check. Again, yes, Creatio, limited internal cloud. Here it is, only one license granted to this person. And in workplace setup, we have internal 1 and internal 2. Yes, I did this on purpose just so I can show you and we'll create internal 3 just again to explore how that works. So first of all, what you need to pay attention to is the workplace type that you're creating. New workplace. We need to choose limited internal. Let's call this internal 3. So then we can add any section. Only one section will be displayed. Let me show you, for example, let's do employees. And even if I add more, I'll show you what happens. Employees and forecasts. Now, for regular workplaces, we always wanted to do to make sure that this is filled in. All the user groups that get access to that. Remember, if nothing is selected here, even your system administrator will not see this workplace. So for example, internal 3 is not listed here, even if I refresh. Why? Because no user group, even system administrator, will fall under that restriction. So you have to grant access to somebody to see it. System administrator doesn't get access to this by default, or any of the workplaces. But usually, the workplaces that you saw, they were granted to system admins. So as you can see, nothing here. It's not visible. Okay, let's fix this. Let's say that this is for all employees. So with the all employees, you have employee and forecast section. So the difference between this, and actually let's test one more scenario, which I just thought about is what will the regular user see in internal. Let me fix this. So let's create somebody, or let's use somebody who is not a limited license, but let's say we'll have a standard license. We will take Megan. Okay, Megan. Let's replace the password and let's check your licenses. Forecast and employee. I need the sales license. Okay, sales. What else do we have? Online, field sales, no. Commerce. These licenses, we no longer have those additions. Basically, the difference. Yeah, so this is the only one. Okay, so let's try to log in under Megan and see what she sees. Typo. So Megan is not a system administrator. She's just a regular user. Okay. So the first, again, data that Megan sees or doesn't see, obviously is by object permission. So demo data, I don't think is exposed. So as you can see in internal 3, and this is kind of like where the difference in license is very apparent as well. In internal 3, Megan, as a regular user, sees 2 sections, employee section and the forecast section. So that's, she might not see the data here yet, just because again of the object permissions that I have, but the sections are available nonetheless, and I can work with them. I do have 2 sections here. If I go to internal 2, have 2 sections as well. I was kind of like internal 1, activities and cases. So even though this is an internal workplace, the limitations will apply to the internal employees. Regular employees with regular licenses, the full user licenses, will see these workplaces unless they're not in the user group that this workplace is for. So as you can see, sales license grants you access to the internal workplaces because it's exposed to the all employees users. Now, what happens to, and let me quickly pull this page here so I can show you how this will affect the changes. what will happen if, let's say, a truly internal user will log in, which in my case will be Peter. So let's step out. Let's log out from Megan and log in under Peter instead. Okay, so here is Peter, the desktop for Peter. And here, as you can see, even though Peter is all employees, I haven't added him into any other kind of user groups. But even if I had, they're all employees, right? So like they all fall under that user role. What Peter sees is the first internal workspace and the first section in that workspace. Internal one, open, section activities. If I make the change, and now this is finally really matters, which section is higher and which one is lower. Let me refresh. Okay, internal one and cases. So activities no longer accessible. Now I have cases and so on. Here it is. Here are the cases. Again, those any other permissions that you will apply to that section will obviously work, but the first thing that the system checks by license is what the first workplace and the first section in that workplace. Let's say I wanted to change that. Again, I can move my workplace higher. So like, see this list, limited, it sits higher. And let's refresh. Yeah, the cases section, which I think if it's left open, let me see what happens. Nothing really, right? No, I can see the, so, and this is kind of, so technically with the direct link, I do get access to that, but on the side, let me see, this is interesting. Maybe nobody thought of, obviously we're not meant to switch things so much around. You're meant to select the section and stay with it. Okay, so basically, if you start just changing the sections and the workplaces that are available for your internal limited employees, they will still, if they have the page open, retain access to those previous sections. The only way we're technically limiting them, as you can see, employees, is by this workplace. So I can't really see anything else. If I go to the contact, I do see other sections as part of lookups. Obviously, I can go and
Okay, the self-service portal. So the self-service portal license is somewhat similar to the previously existing license of the self-service portal. The only difference is it can be for external users or it can be for internal, for the company employee. If their only thing that they need to do is creating cases, working with cases, and so on. So by license, the only section that will be accessible to them is access to cases and knowledge base section. So again, very similar to what we used to have with a self-service portal license. However, the difference here is that now it's going to be accessible to company employees as well as external users. They will have very limited, they will have no read access to any other sections, so only lookups. So if there's a context section mentioned or things like that, obviously in the cases record, they will not be able to access that section. So there will be limited access to that section. They cannot set up analytics, the column setup, filters. So they're basically logging in and just working with the section. So again, compared to the full user, there will be restrictions in terms of what they can do within the system. No emails, no chat, no CTI panel. So there are these limitations. Okay, and there's also a workplace connected to this user license, the same as with limited. There is a restriction in order to properly set up the self-service portal user, you need to create a self-service portal workplace for them.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at how the self-service portal license works. So I have added this license to an external user. However, you can use the self-service license for company employees as well. That's one of the, again, licenses that can be applied to company employees and external user types. So let me quickly show you. So here's Andrew Wayne. And under licenses, I have the Creatio Self-Service Portal Cloud license. Now, let me log out quickly and log in under Andrew. So since we already seen what the external users see, and Andrew Wayne is one of the external users, you will notice the difference between those external users that we saw previously and him. And that's the difference in terms of which sections he can be exposed to. So regardless whether you're using a company employee or you're using a external user, you're exposing the user only to two sections, cases and knowledge base. So for example, I have two workplaces, self-service and external, but in external, I don't see the request section that I was adding for my users that were Alex and Jordan. So as you can see, again, the limitations that are applied on the license level will take priority over what you do on the levels below. So like basically that's the workplace setup or the object permissions. So what I have is the access to the cases section. By default, I should be able to see my own cases. So if I create a case, let me quickly do that for Andrew, just to illustrate that here's my service request, consultation, using the printer. So then later on, I will be able to work with these cases. I will be able to see the progress on the case. So that part is fairly standard. But due to the license and exception, as you can see, I do have my self-service workplace. There is a separate self-service workplace that you can expose to that user. What you will notice that even if you expose the external one, you can see that the user will not see any other section from that list. So they only get access to the cases and to the knowledge base. Again, make sure that you're sharing the articles with your external or internal self-service portal users, and then they will be able to just interact with those two sections. So.
And last but not least is the mobile user. The mobile user is a user that will only have access to the mobile application. So this user will not be able to log in into Creatio from the browser. And this is where a lot of people get this confused. Browser on the phone also counts. So if you're trying to log in from the phone into the browser version of Creatio, with this license type, you will not be able to do this. So this license doesn't require any additional configuration. It's basically just where you can access this from. Keep in mind that the application has to be configured. So the hard part here is ensuring that the application, the mobile application, has all the appropriate sections, everything is set up, because they will not be able to use the desktop version. So regardless of what these users expose, so you can expose to any sections, there's no restriction there. but you need to remember to configure the application for them, for the mobile application. Okay, so let's take a look at how this works. We'll first try to log in the browser, even desktop, mobile, and then we'll see that from this user, I can log in as the mobile, into the mobile application.
Okay, the last user type that we are talking about is the mobile only. So again, I want to emphasize this user will be able to log in only using the mobile application on their phone, but they won't be able to access the environment from any browser, whether it's a desktop browser, a mobile browser. So let's use William as an example. So William, let me show you, has mobile only license. Mobile only. Let's try to log in under William. As you can see, there for a second, it looked like I was able to log in because, again, the user has permission to Creatio. However, this license doesn't support the web app, meaning the desktop application. So I need to use a mobile application, and then I will be able to log in. Okay, last but not least is license distribution. So starting with the 8.1.3 version, you can distribute licenses not only based on manually granting them, and you saw that my licenses were granted manually, but you can also distribute them based on a role, which can help you greatly streamline how the licenses are distributed. So what you will need to do is basically grant the license, and the license inheritance applies the same way as access permission inheritance works. So for example, if I add a license here for the all employees role, so this is my Studio Enterprise. So this is the what I talked about, the platform license. So anybody who's an all employees will have that platform license available to them. Now I can, for example, for the sales department, I could put a sales license for that department. So for example, let's do the enterprise edition here. Meaning that any user who is in the sales department will actually have two of these licenses. So you don't have to duplicate your efforts. If you're, depending on how your organizational roles are structured, you can grant the parent role the platform license, and then all the roles below, the subordinate roles might have those additional licenses. So let me add somebody, like, let's do Simon Clark. Okay. So if we go to licenses, we see two licenses being distributed to Simon Clark. We have the Sales Creatio Enterprise license, and we have the Studio Creatio Enterprise license for Simon. Simon is part of the all employees role, and Simon is part of the sales team role. So Simon, as you can see, it's listed that it's based on a role. I did not manually distribute this. And Simon will be able to use sales functionality. So keep in mind that certain functionalities are licensed separately. Okay, that being said, another way to distribute access or licenses could be with the use of functional roles. So let's say that you have your organizational structure doesn't really match the license structure that you are intending to use. Let's say that certain roles will contain both regular users, full users, some users will be limited users. So organizational structure is not a good reflection of that. You could utilize functional roles, and the functional roles that you create could then include licenses that you will be distributing with that role. So for example, if I wanted to create the limited internal, I could create a role like that, add users or add other organizational roles there, and then add the necessary license to that role based on the functional role that I created. I can then additionally distribute the licenses for these users, so which will assist my organizational structure, which might not again match the desired outcome in terms of licenses. So from the license distribution and new license tab standpoint, this is all the information for today. If you have any questions, we were trying to answer them in the chat, or you can post them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them later if you're watching this in the recording. And we'll see you guys next week with the next Tech Hour session. Thanks. Bye.